folks, Joe Joseph here for thedailysheeple.com, and this is your news shot. Let's go to Chicago. Oh boy, one of the communist hubs of the United States, if you will. Well, Idiocracy is running amok in Chicago like much of the United States. And there's a pastor in Chicago, according to CBS Chicago, that wants the president's names removed from Washington and Jackson Parks over their ties to slavery. Because, see, this nonsense is just going to keep going on and on and on and on. And the news cycle is just going to relentlessly bash us upside the head with all of this garbage that's going on in the country. Let's be honest, folks. Come on. You have to understand that this is as old can be, divide and conquer, and it's being used and people are just eating it up. Well, this Chicago pastor has asked Rahm, let's never let a good crisis go to waste, Emmanuel, to remove the names of two presidents who owned slaves from parks on the south side of Chicago, saying the city should not honor slave owners in black communities. There's a bronze statue of George Washington on horseback standing at the corner of 51st and King Drive at the northwest entrance of Washington Park. And Bishop James Duke, pastor of the Liberation Christian Center, says he wants the statue gone, and he wants George Washington's name removed from the park. And you see all of these people all over the country. We're taking down the Confederate statues and everything else. Remember, whether you like it or not, this is all part of our history. But we were sold a bill of goods with regard to all of us that went to public school. We were told the wrong things when it came to the Civil War, like why it was fought in the first place. Why did people feel it so necessary to break up the Union? Because think about it today. How hard is it, and how hard would it be? And it would be hard. I know that you see a lot of people out there talking about, Civil War is coming. It's not that easy, you see. It doesn't exactly work that way. It takes a lot for people to leave their comfort zones. Okay? And people in the crappiest low-income ghetto in the United States still have a comfort zone. Most of them. Some have nothing to lose. And some are prompted by these companies, these crowd-on-demand companies that'll pay $25 an hour to have these crowds just show up to cause all sorts of hate and discontent all over Amurika. That's what's happening. The Daily Sheeple has a great article that was posted today about an ad on Craigslist for one of these crowd companies that are looking for people in the Charlotte, North Carolina area for something next week or next month or so. All I can say is, what's going to happen down in Charlotte now? You know, who is Soros going after now down in Charlotte? Or what is he trying to foment? I want to talk a little bit about the real reasons why we went to civil war. And for that, I'm going to go over to Ron Paul forums, because oftentimes I find that people with a liberty-minded standpoint can look at things from an unbiased perspective, meaning that, okay, was it really about slavery? Was it really about, North versus South? What was it really about? Now, many people think the Civil War was fought over slavery. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. The war between the states began because the South demanded states' rights and they weren't getting them. Which, by the way, is expressly articulated in the Constitution. That anything that is not written in the Constitution, anything that's not spelled out in the Constitution, after that is reserved to the states or to the people. Now, the Congress at the time heavily favored the industrialization or the industrialized northern states to the point of demanding that the South sell its cotton and other raw materials only to factories in the North rather than to other countries. And the Congress also taxed the finished material that the northern industries produced heavily, making finished products that the South wanted unaffordable. Now, the Civil War shouldn't have occurred. If the northern states and their representatives in Congress had only listened to the problems of the South and stopped these practices that were almost like taxation without representation of Great Britain, which, by the way, was a civil war that we gained our independence from over taxes, much like the Civil War, then the southern states wouldn't have seceded and the war would never have happened. You know, we've been taught that the Civil War was about the abolition of slavery, but that didn't truly become a major issue with the exception of John Brown's raid of Harper's Ferry. And until after the Battle of Antietam in 1862 in September, when Abraham Lincoln decided to free the slaves in the Confederate States to punish those states for continuing the war effort. Because the war had been in progress for 2 years by that time. And most Southerners didn't even own slaves or plantations. Most of them were just small farmers that worked their farms and their families. Kind of like how it is with our interventions now overseas, where we go and intervene, and I've been there directly. I know 99.8% of the people just want to be left alone. They're just people like you and me that want to be left alone. But that's not the case oftentimes. And so these people, they get kind of dragged into this thing by a very small minority. And in this case, they're fighting for their rights. They were fighting to maintain their lifestyle and their independence the way that they wanted to without the U.S. government dictating to them how they should behave. You know, and why were we frequently taught that the Civil War, the war of Northern aggression, it's often called, the war between the states, why are we taught that it was solely about slavery? And it's because the history books are always written by the winners, right? The winners always write the history. Because the war was won by the Union, you have your northern universities. They all kind of take part, and they're the ones that formulate your public school curriculum material, and that's what we've ingested for the last 150 years. Now, you can look at both sides of the story, and if you listen to people and read many different books on the subject, including some of the volumes of the official record of the Civil War and the congressional record, you come to find out that the Civil War was more than abolishing the institution of slavery. It wasn't as black and white as that. It was about preserving the United States and protecting the rights of the individual. If you're really going to try and generalize it, that's really what it was about. Black and white, rich and poor, it didn't matter. Which, by the way, are the very tenets upon what this country was founded on. You know, this is what we've established since day one. That it's about the rights of the individual. And that's the issue. It had really more to do with the rights of the individual at the start of the war. And then towards the middle of the war, that's when slavery started coming in with the Emancipation Proclamation and the freeing of the slaves. But let's also be clear here, okay? Hatred has existed before slavery, before it came to America. It's going on right now in other parts of the world. Look over in China at some of these factories, say the ones that produce iPhones. Look what's going on there. It's so bad to the point where people are putting notes in merchandise, just telling of the bad conditions that are going on. I mean, it's crazy what's happening over in China. Where's the outrage? Oh, that's China. All I can say is we Americans really need to pull our heads out of our butts and see how this hatred is being fomented and by who. Who's funding this? Who's starting this? Because really, in reality, we are nothing more than pawns on a chessboard if we allow ourselves to be used in that way. And that's exactly how we're being used right now. If you buy into this, if you participate in these idiotic demonstrations that take down monuments and deface property and all that kind of stuff, it's absolutely asinine. Let's focus on who the real problem is, and let's put our differences aside. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? So even if you have animosity towards somebody with a different skin color or different social status or income or religion, don't you think that it would be in everybody's best interest right now to end these shenanigans, to come together and fight against the forces who have raped and pillaged this country and our society now for, well, a very long time, certainly since the founding of this country and well before. So, much like the 9/11 investigations, right, that everybody did on their own and everybody's right, and now you've got people that fight each other about, oh, I'm right and you're right. No. The founding fathers didn't see eye to eye on many things, but boy, did they come together, and boy, did they whip the biggest world-dominating empire of the day, and did so with what? Farmers with pitchforks and muskets. So, I mean, think about that. Let's put our differences aside, and let's protest and fight against the real people that are causing the real problems. And once we get them out of the way, then let's come together and pound out our differences in a civil manner without all these idiotic events that do nothing more than play into their strategy and give them energy and give them everything that we shouldn't be giving them. I'm Joe Joseph. This was thedailysheeple.com's News Shot. Feel free to comment below and visit our website at thedailysheeple.com. Have a great day.